So please welcome Elise.
You make me feel like I'm Superwoman or something.
You are.
You know, we don't go home now after that first hour in the morning, don't you think? Inspired, really electrified, thank you. And you know, he has great negotiation skills. He got the first tie. They were not available for sale, and Archer had just brought them in. So let me begin by saying not only thank you to Michael and to Monica and Anita and Debbie, they've all done so much work here, but thank you to a number of you whom I have seen and have known from other times here in West Virginia and mediation work here, because Archer Sempt, who's now 18, is only alive because of prayers. You know, one of the things that happens to people in conflict, and I am a conflict expert, as you are too, is we isolate. And knowing that that was the tendency, we went outward and asked people daily in a writing that I began, Being Relational, Archer Sempt, for prayers. And the most extraordinary thing happened over the course of our being in 5 ICUs, 3 states over almost a year, trying to keep him alive on every kind of life support except dialysis, heart attacks, collapsed lungs, chest tubes, feeding tube, ventilator, and on it goes. But it truly was an energy field that was created by your prayers. And they came from all over the world, and they came from small places and large, and they came from individuals, and they came from Christians, and they came from Jews, and they came from Muslims, and I even had correspondence from 2 atheists who told me they did not believe as I believed in God, but they wanted to be helpful and a part of healing that I was going for. So similar to the Buddhists who also wrote me, they said in their own ways that their positive intentions were their form of prayer. And an energy field was created for our son. And I will share with you that he is alive and well. As Michael mentioned, he doesn't have use of his arms or his hands, but he has a very strong top bicep. And so we splint him, and he has a stylist, and he was an amazing athlete before. He's 6'4". With the accident, he was also a fantastic portrait artist. And so he is finding expression through that metal stylus on a small iPad that we have mounted on an electric power chair for him. And so I hope you enjoy. Maybe you'll get a tie, maybe you'll get a hat, maybe you'll get a shirt. I'm not here to sell slime yard slimes, which is what he calls it, which is a complete parody on Vineyard Vines. He has the snail of slime yard slimes. But Arch will be going to college. We missed his entire junior year of high school, but he just graduated from an amazing high school, and he graduated with honors, and he was elected or voted to do the commencement speech. And he applied early decision and was accepted into the School of Engineering. He's a very smart kid at University of Pennsylvania. So he'll be at Penn in the fall. 24/7 care, we haven't figured that out yet, but we know we will if you continue to pray for us. So thank you, and please don't stop your prayers. They have mattered very much for us. Those of you in the back, please come forward. We have, you know how that is. I think it was probably Monica who says like church, you know, the front row chairs might always have some availability. I want to know who's here. You probably want to find out a little bit about our backgrounds. How many lawyers are in the room? Raise your hand. I just want to make sure we're in the right place with the Bar Association. What kind of practices do you all have? Call it out.
Family law.
Family law,
Whatever walks through.
civil, lawsuit, whatever walks in the door. What else?
Employment.
Employment. Any other types of practice? Trust in the states, tax, anything else? Yes, trust in the state, all right. So predominantly family and then civil litigation? Yeah, okay, yes, okay. How many judges are in the room? Right, you want to stand up, be identified? I know I had a lovely dinner with a couple of those handsome guys in the back. Come on, stand up. You have your colleagues around you that want to, like, you've come far and wide. Right, very good. You're hovering together. Thank you. Glad that you are here.
A whole bunch of retired ones.
How many retired lawyers and judges might we have in the room? Yeah, fantastic, fantastic. Sometimes mediation is, if you haven't already made that step, it's a really lovely two-step from practice into a different kind of practice. You know, I ask this because a number of you, I have been told, might not be mediating, which is perfectly fine, but I'm curious how many of you do mediate? How many of you have mediated more than 5 matters? Wow. How many of you have mediated more than 25 matters? Impressive. And how many of you think of yourself and put yourself out as a mediator, as your primary lifestyle or livelihood? Okay, wonderful. Gosh, Baltimore Mediation was born almost 25 years ago when I stepped out of a large law firm practice, corporate litigation. I was, along with another dear friend, now Judge Albert Matriciani, we were sort of designated as the 2 persons in a 116-member law firm in Baltimore that would do the family work. So if I was doing insurance defense work or if I was doing corporate work, I almost always had the family work or Albert. And what we found is that in the style of a large law firm, everything from a litigation standpoint, if it walked in the door and came to us, was litigated. And I found, I hadn't planned on saying this, but I'll give you a bit of background. I just jumped off the cliff one day, as they say, and left my beautiful, wonderful corporate practice because I had found, I'd had 2 children at that time, and we have 5, my husband and I have 5 children, and we just celebrated our 33rd wedding anniversary a couple weekends ago. So we've been in there for the long haul, although sometimes I will say I've been married 3 times. People will be like, really? Like, yes, to the same man. We have absolutely, we've been mediated. We have renegotiated different chapters of our lives. One of the ones with Archer, our son Arch, is the latest. In fact, I'm being a little circular right now, but within 24 hours of his injury, as Michael mentioned, we have a home in Cape May, New Jersey, where we go for respite, and I suspect that you might go to the water, many of you, for respite too, and we're at that time of the year. And that's where we all were, and Archer had been working, all my children have summer jobs when we go to the beach. And you know, my husband and I will go back and forth, or he'll sort of anchor the home front. And Archer had been working on a really hot grill at the beach club and had finished up and asked his boss if he could go take a dip to cool off. And he raced down the waters, this tall, 6'4", tall, beautiful glass of water kind of kid, and arced into a big wave, the surfer, and instead of diving into a wave, there was an unexpected, very high sandbar. And so his neck shattered, and he was a quadriplegic immediately. He heard, he said, just this boom, and nothing, you know, he can't do anything. So within 24 hours, I knew that we needed some help. We weren't leaving the hospital, and one of my very dear friends, who actually has headed up mediation in the state of Maryland and worked for our Chief Judge Bell for many years Rachel Wall and had been the executive director of MACRO. Some of you might be familiar with MACRO, the Maryland Mediation and Conflict Resolution Organization. She and her husband had rented a home for the month of August in Cape May because we've been after them for years. Come and visit us. Just come. Just rent a place yourself. We'll be down here together. And they were in about their third summer of doing so. And so I knew I had a heck of a mediator close by. And that we called immediately. And the first time that we were released from the hospital, just to go take a shower, I think it was on day 3, Rachel came. So the idea of mediation for other people is something that I believe deeply in, but as deeply, I believe in mediation for ourselves. And I'd be curious if there's anyone here, and you don't have to identify yourself, who has been a part of mediation for your own family or for your own civil matter that may have been filed, or perhaps you were trying to avoid that. It's a heck of an opportunity to be able to have the kind of dialogue that people yearn for. So when I left Whiteford Taylor and Preston, almost 25 years ago, it was with arm around my shoulder with one of my partners who said, what is it that you're doing? And I said, it's mediation. The pavement's cold out there. You'll be back. And another one of my partners, he put his arm around me too, and he said, I've not known you to be a dabbler, Louise Vincent. And I said, Dale, I'm not dabbling. And he said, we'll see, the door's always open. And they probably should not have told me those things, because I knew that I wasn't going to now go back. And the pavement was cold. And some days I did think I was dabbling. But Baltimore Mediation was born, and it was really born with a deep, deep belief in what people have the capacity to do. And not that it has to be other than litigation. I love how Michael said, he really believes in the jury trial, as do I. I mean, we are an amazing country, of Americans who have the most amazing civil system than anywhere else in the world. We can throw stones and say healthcare is a mess, and when we do, we've got serious messes. That needs a lot of mediation, by the way. I mean, every time you go to your own dinner table, or I will say your vacation spot, and you're with your siblings, all of whom are smart people in their 50s and 60s and 40s and 70s, you may have voted for different people in the last election. It's dividing families. They're not even going on vacation anymore. Our lives need mediators. Our lives need the kind of skill set that mediators have, whether you mediate or you don't. And that's really the stepping off point that I would like to take with you all this morning and then for the rest of the day. I did create an agenda. Sometimes people get nervous, like, well, what are we doing and where are we going? And so I thought I'd share this with you, and then you can help me stay on track. So, who's here? Anatomy of the process, co-creating expectations, managing the issues and the humans, and leaning into the bumps and staying in the saddle. Those are the 4 components that you signed up for. So we're going to deliver on that. The anatomy of the process, I'd like to work with you on understanding the conflict experience. And then share with you conflict theory, something that I have been passionate about for quite some time. And we write extensively about these things, out of which have come some state-of-the-art terms of empowerment and recognition, specifically in the field of mediation. I have taken it though, so I'm a law professor too. I loved when I saw Tom Patrick. It's just great to see you in the flesh, who's been in the field for so long, and our paths have crossed and our telephone lines have been filled with some conversation over the years. I am also a professor up at Harvard's program on negotiation, and that's really an amazing place where people come from around the world, presidents of countries. They're interested in what I would like to touch on this morning with you, conflict theory. and empowerment and recognition, and how it is that conflict interaction is actually changed. So we'll take a look at that, and then I'll share with you a little bit of the research. We'll then take a break, and after the break, come back into this co-creating expectations. What are your first thoughts about mediation? What are the goals of mediation, of the mediator? And I want to pause and put a little footnote here that while this portion of our time together will be focused, this portion, I mean like in particular after the break, will be focused on mediation. I mean, this is an advanced mediation day. Wouldn't want you to go home if you didn't have something very specific on mediation. We will then use this time, however, to jump off into a much wider platform for you who negotiate, you who communicate. By the way, how many negotiators do we have in the room? Raise your hand. How many communicators do we have in the room? Every hand should be going up when I say negotiator. I'm going to ask it again. How many negotiators do we have in this room? You betcha. And how many communicators? Absolutely. You couldn't walk into this room this morning without having had communication with at least one person today. And if you count it up, probably 5, maybe 10. In my household, I just don't even get out the door where it's been 7. So I get a lot of practice. But then this section, specifically on mediation, first thoughts and goals, we're going to take a look at the ethical standards. Many mediators are not aware of them, they're not familiar with them, and they really guide practice, our orientation, and also what it is that we would call a particular process. And you will have a choice in how it is that you choose to mediate every single mediation and every single moment, as Michael was saying. So I thought we might take a look at how I open a session and how what's important, how that is woven in, regardless of whether it is family or it is civil litigation, and everything in between. Those of you who said you were in employment, I'm always surprised, which is a lovely part about being a mediator. I imagine that we've mediated probably every possible variety of family matter or employment matter that's come up, including weird things. But it's really quite fascinating. Regardless, we do open in a particular way, and how it is that we look at the process itself, guided by our ethical standards. And because so many of you are in the context, those of you who are mediating or thinking about it in your next career, will be working potentially with multiple parties, often counsel at the table. Not always, however. I thought I'd give you a bit of a look at how it is that we work with multiple parties, and really what are some of the most important things so that you might be thinking about that. And then finish that up with some mediator self-awareness, which is really where the rubber meets the road. And a little footnote, working with multiple parties, any dinner that you go to, like ours last night was a blast, and it was just wonderful. Well, you have multiple parties, around a dinner table. Your skill set has the opportunity to be practiced and shined all the time because you're alive and you're living life. So that will be our morning. We'll then break for lunch, and lunch is on your own as I'm understanding it, and you'll have about an hour and 15 minutes. Is that right about that? I'm going to put this elsewhere. And then taking a look at our afternoon, which I will do a little bit more briefly here. Excuse me, I'm going to get a little. Mediators are resourceful. You can even get down in the garden, as Michael would say. The afternoon, managing the issues and the humans. I want to come back to our ethical standards, and then I'll just briefly say, pulling it all together, this can be something incredibly useful for you when you negotiate and in life. Taking a look at specific, there are 2 skills that I think we really can't live without. They're as close to breathing in the mediator's parlance as breath. So the listening piece, transactional tendencies, I'd like to share with you some of the neuroscience. I've been studying neuroscience now as it's really coming to the fore. And I was just dabbling around with it probably about maybe, I don't know, before I met Michael, so let's just say 16 years, something like that. And now it has really, really very intentionally set into practice. And you might be hearing some of that, right, in other forums. And it is fascinating in that regard. With the reflection skill, and then how it is that we consider and think about resistance. Break, and then finish our afternoon leaning into the bumps, staying in the saddle by looking at relational moments. You all have, I'm really delighted and tickled that you all have one of the books, Being Relational. That is hot off the press, relatively speaking. A little story about being relational. My husband, Bill Semt, who is also an attorney and a CPA, and in our practice, been in our practice now for, about 10 years. He finally joined the ranks. It was all good. We wrote this book, and it really took me about 20 years of thinking about this book. And I started writing, and I'd been at it for about almost 2 years. And Billy said, and I'd write some stuff, and I thought it was decent, it was okay, and I'd write some other stuff, and I thought it was garbage. And I'd go to Kate May, and I'd write for a week, and I'd come back and say, the more I write, and he said, let me help you just organize it. And that, he was doing a one-to-one mediation with me. And it was so helpful and so sparkly that he had to be a co-author. And then he took some of these pieces and really helped shine some of them up. So I'm enormously grateful to him. You have a copy. It actually became a national bestseller while we were in the ICU with Archer. It had launched September 1st, and Archer's accident was August 5th, just not quite 2 years ago. So when I see you with the book, I can't tell you how much it warms my heart, and I hope it is meaningful to you. It's written in an incredibly practical way, and I'll share some of that before we finish out our day and take a look at capacity. And then we will be adjourning at 4:30. So with that day, as we have it all laid out, I apologize if this comes down there, but we will make do with that, possibly even removing it. I would like to find out from you all, when you think about conflict, do you ever associate everything you do in the mediation room with conflict? I'm curious about that. Have you ever thought about that? Someone asks you to mediate, that they're asking you to step into conflict. What do you think about it? Yeah, and you think about it every minute. It's exactly right. Your paw print, as you step into other people's conflict, will shape their conflict. So there's a radical choice that you need to make in how it is that you want to shape that conflict. For me, it has been a radical choice of creating well-being. So what we know when people come to mediation is that they're having a conflict experience. And so what we would say that they are looking for is someone to help them with that conflict experience. No matter how sophisticated they are, no matter how uneducated they are, no matter how poor they are, no matter how resourced they are, they come to you looking for a change in the experience because they're not able to do it on their own, or they're stuck in a system that's not allowing them to do it on their own, or they're with a representative, an advocate, not allowing them. So they're coming to you looking for a change in the experience. Let's talk about what is that experience. And for me, there's like no better way to understand the experience than to take a look at ourselves. Let's see where we are. Ah, yes. This is not our slide. But I will tell you, we're not talking about triangling today, but this is a great 3-hour presentation. So I will ask Anita if she could put me back into the system, and we'll get the one that we need. And we will continue moving on while you do that, because When we think about how it is we're going to help other people. Yeah, West Virginia. You can look at yourselves. So I'd like for you to find a partner in the room, someone sitting right next to you or maybe behind you. This is going to be two people together kind of experience. And by the way, I will keep track of time on everything that we do. I have this wonderful bell. Isn't that a lovely sound?
West Virginia Law Enforcement.
That's it. Thank you. This bell, the sound, this particular tone, was given to me by a Buddhist nun, and I'm Catholic by background and had no idea there were Buddhist nuns at the time. I've been traveling with it for almost 2 decades now. And she gave it to me and said, you will know what to do with this. And so this mallet actually was one of my youngest sons who just graduated from 8th grade. This was from his xylophone because I kept losing the actual mallets, but it works perfectly. That tone is something that I use with all my students in the law school or in Harvard's program, because what it actually does is it settles you in this part of your system, this chakra of your system. I've been studying meridians of the body and chakras and anything related to conflict for a long time. So when you hear that beautiful sound, that means just pause wherever you are. And I will allow you to have a spa day while you are here with the West Virginia Bar Association. So as part of that spa day, when I hit this bell, begin a conversation with your partner on this topic. And it's going to look like different roles, because one of you is going to be someone who is listening, and the other person is going to be someone who is speaking. And it doesn't matter who goes first. The topic is, what is something that's happened with you and somebody else recently, in particular, could be in the past, where you had some conflict with somebody you cared about, and something about it was upsetting or disturbing. That's the topic. Think about something that was upsetting or disturbing to you that happened when you had some conflict with someone else. And I will share with you that right before I left to drive through the beautiful hills and mountains of West Virginia yesterday, I had a conflict with Archer, who's now 18, our son, who's the quadriplegic. And it was about, he's lost so much weight. And his body has no appetite. It's really sort of shutting down. And he doesn't see what I see. I mean, he also has chosen not to have a mirror, in his room. But as I was trying to say, Arch, we just came from this assessment. We've lost so much weight. We need to really get big on protein shakes and feeding you again, every 3 hours and so forth. He's like, Ma, I'm fine. He feels great. He's producing art. He has an art show right now at Sotheby's Gallery. He's got this arm going and that splint. He feels like he's off to the races, and I'm seeing him, this tall boy, get incredibly thin. What is most upsetting or disturbing to me? He doesn't see what I see. And he doesn't see it my way. It should be that he needs to eat every 3 hours and protein. So what is it for you that's most upsetting or disturbing about something that you have going on right now? We don't have to come and talk about it, but you will be talking about it with your partner. And both of you will have the opportunity to talk about this for about 3 minutes. A total of about 6 minutes, okay? Just something that you have a conflict around with somebody else. What is it that's most upsetting or disturbing? Question number 1. And question number 2, what, if anything, relieved it? And I will share with you that this morning I woke up to a text from Archer that said, "Ma, I get it. Don't worry. Dad's here feeding me." So that was interesting, right? That absolutely gave me some relief before I began this morning.
Would each person have a problem, or just one person?
Everybody's got a problem, so we wouldn't leave anybody out. Great question. Yes, so you got a partner? If you don't have a partner, raise your hand because somebody needs you. All right, so find your partner. I'll keep track of time for you. Begin. Welcome back. Welcome back. Well done. Doesn't it feel good? Like you say, hey, to the person sitting next to you. I hope you had a chance to introduce yourself to each other if you didn't already know each other. Like, yeah, it's good to see you today. All right. So, speaking for yourself, what is it? What is it? You didn't make it up, did you? I mean, it was real, right? just checking. You know, exactly. Was it ever? So what is it that is most upsetting or disturbing to you? What is it? What are some of the things that are most upsetting or disturbing? You know, I so often say that, you know, in my case, he didn't see it my way. Didn't see what I saw. Didn't see my way. Enormously upsetting to me. What about for you? So the situation was when someone asks for your advice and then completely ignores it. What's most upsetting or disturbing about that?
Well, in a particular case, it's a ideal the advice that they giving is very solid.
So you've got time-tested, solid advice you're giving your daughter. What's most disturbing when she doesn't take your advice?
That she's ruining her own chance for happiness.
Okay.
For resolution.
So you think she's ruining her own chance for happiness. And what's most upsetting to you about that? She's not seeing it my way. Right. So that she's, well, I had he, we'll just put she, not seeing it my way. Yeah. And it does have this component too about other, and that is that she might mess up her life. What if she were to wreck her life? What would be most upsetting to you about that?
Continue the process and asking my advice.
So what's most upsetting?
Not seeing it my way.
So it really comes back to not seeing it my way. Even with that, she might wreck her life because it's not seeing it my way. Oh, good, thank you. Others. What's most upsetting?
Not doing what's right.
Not doing what's right. You or the other person?
The other person.
The other person. Okay. Of course we knew it was the other person. So when the other person is not doing it right, what's most upsetting to you about that? What's most upsetting?
Because it is my basic sense of fairness.
Right? So it doesn't meet my sense of fairness. And what if it doesn't meet your sense of fairness? Then it's upsetting and disturbing, right? And when it's upsetting and disturbing, what's upsetting and disturbing about being upsetting and disturbing? Affects me. Okay. So let's get that up here. So other not doing it right is the fear that it's going to then affect me. In what way? Positively, negatively? Yeah, it's going to affect me negatively. It's back to me. Others? Yes.
Everyone is probably wants to feel respect. Their elders is up there. That's what we respect.
So you're in a conflict with somebody else and you know that they want to be respected and you believe that they know that you want to be respected. What's most upsetting or disturbing when you don't get respect?
No, I guess everyone.
What about for you?
Look at give and.
Yeah, so you have a worldview. Everyone wants respect. Another worldview is that everyone wants to command respect. So when,
The answers, we're not sure.
of course, yeah, so it's about, I have, so I'll do it again. So you will say, everybody wants to be able to have respect, right? So what happens when you don't get respect? You say, I don't know. So I guess it goes back to fairness. What is it about fairness? Well, I think everybody should have respect. So there's something about this that is triggering, goes against your own worldview. Because everybody wants it, so when we don't get it, it's what to you? What's upsetting to you about that? You have a worldview that gets, it disrupts my worldview and the whole order of life, right? Good. So disrupts my worldview, which to me is like the whole order of life is upset. Because that's how we see the world. Yeah, I see it where everybody wants respect. Is there anything else you'd want to add to that? Because we don't really think about these questions very often, do we? They're way underneath.
I guess, we all need to project. We project on another.
So there's another one. We all engage in projecting. That's a worldview.
Correct. We project on the others the way we see it.
And we project onto others the way we see the world. That's a worldview.
Right.
Okay?
And I think even though you try to keep that in mind, I just think fundamentally everyone wants.
So what happens for you when you were in conflict with somebody else and that worldview was not met? The voice.
So,
Yeah, you move into trying to persuade them. And what's upsetting or disturbing about that? Aha, there we go. Okay, so when I move into trying to persuade someone and it's not always possible, right? I may not be effective with having other people see it my way. Yeah. Is that resonating? I mean, it's pretty powerful, isn't it? Right underneath is like all my persuasion, and I see it so clearly, and I think everybody sees it the same way I do. Everybody projects, everybody wants respect. I'm not effective, even when I'm trying to advocate for that. I really appreciate that. Thank you. And I hope that I'm doing a better job of being able to mirror back. Others. Let's get two more. When you were in conflict with someone, what was it that was most upsetting or disturbing?
Some breakdown in communication.
Okay? So it was a breakdown in communication, and what was most disturbing about that?
Well, when you talk to somebody for 24 years and they don't talk to you anymore, it's very, very.
Yeah, so here's a relationship of 24 years where the breakdown in communication, and they're not talking to you anymore. So the other just simply not talking anymore. And the part that is most upsetting to you about that is,
I can't get through to them.
yeah, I'm ineffective. I can't get through to them. Even a relationship of 24 years. Thank you. One more. You're in a conflict with somebody, but you know somebody you care about, yes.
I think it disrupts your personal peace. You have conflict with somebody, you don't like walking around in a city where you are feeling like there's not peace in your soul because of an important relationship.
Yeah. So my personal peace is disturbed, including the relationship I have with my soul. And so, what is the most disturbing aspect for you when your personal peace is disturbed?
Well, I think it's people that are close to me, obviously want to preserve those relationships. I want them to be intact. I want them to be healthy. And when there's a sense of unrest in your soul about that, it weighs heavy on your heart. I mean, I litigate, so it doesn't bother me to be in conflict with other lawyers about other issues.
Because there are rules to that.
And you know that. I mean, you engage in that. You don't like that.
You don't.
I'm shy away from it, but personally, I want to make sure I'm in relationships there.
So when they're not intact and is the soul relationship that you have and your peace is disturbed, what is it that's most upsetting to you about that?
I think those are the most valuable relationships to me. So I'm thinking there's that.
Yeah, those are the most valuable relationships to me.
Things in my life.
So that I might lose what is most important to me in my life. A litigator says what is most important to me. I might lose. Yeah. It's tender, isn't it? It's tender. What do you notice about these kind of answers? I want to read them out to you. I might lose you, who are the most important thing, that relationship in my life. When my personal peace is disturbed by you, and he didn't see what I saw, when she doesn't see it my way, that the other is not doing it right, the way I would do it, doesn't meet the other, doesn't meet my sense of fairness, that the impact of this will affect me negatively, that my worldview, I see the whole world is disrupted. So my order of life is upset. I may not be effective. You heard that 3 times. I may not be effective with convincing you. I may not be effective having you see it my way. The other is not talking to me anymore. And I can't get through to them. This is different, isn't it? When you start to really get under and look at what is it that is most disturbing to human beings in their conflicts. There is a rhythm. We've been studying this now for almost 20 years. Do you see the pattern? We want to take a shot at it? There are 2 actors. Self, Debbie?
All these comments are very self-centered.
Absolutely, there's a self-absorbed quality to them.
Like, that person doesn't see me. I didn't hear any quality of, maybe I should work harder to see the other side.
Well, the question was, what is it that's most upsetting or disturbing?
I know, but I think that's...
But there's no quality in that about, I think I'm going to work harder to see the other side.
Right,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So do you suppose that the other person whom you were thinking about would be answering these questions similarly?
Yes.
Yeah. There's an absolute reciprocity in conflict. It's self and other. And this is what has spawned and generated the work that we've taken a micro focus to with regard to theory. So conflict theory, there are a number of them. And I want to go through, as best we know it, the 4 theories that we have right now in the field of mediation, and I will also share with you, this applies for negotiation, communication as well. The first theory, and this, what I'm sharing with you, got crystal clear because the Hewlett Foundation devoted resources to having a study. Are there theories to conflict? Why are there different mediators? Why are there these different mediations that are sort of popping up? What differentiates them? What makes them separate or different? And so what we have found is that there are 4 predominant theories. And I also want to say, as a theorist and someone who is academic and very practical, I think, who knows, maybe another 1,000 years there'll be another theory. Maybe, who knows, maybe 20 years. But as best we know it right now, power theory. Power theory looks at conflict as a struggle for power. And so what does that struggle for power need? It needs to get organized, right? So there can be power over. So you'll see, well, where do you see power theory? Power theory is everywhere. Where do you see conflict being resolved using power theory? What comes to mind? What comes to mind? Power theory. Control, absolutely. So if you think about control, where the view of conflict is that it is a power struggle. And what it is that people need most is somebody to control that struggle. You see power theory at play. You see it in families? Absolutely. It could simply be, I'm the mother. I make the rules. No whining in the kitchen. You know, it's a tiny little piece of, power theory. Do you see power theory in government? Right? It's very much a my way. It's wanting to amass. Would be people come and they're asking you to sign a petition. It's power theory at play. Because it has to do with the more you can amass, the more people you can sway to your side, the more power you will have over something or a group. It's power theory. And I want you to think about these things in light of, does one of these theories really guide you as a mediator? Because indeed, the mediator who comes into the mediation as I control the process, you control the outcome, that's power theory. Rights theory is something very, very familiar to all of you, probably near and dear to your hearts. Rights theory views conflict not as a struggle for power, but actually as a struggle for competing rights. Which of the rights will prevail over another? And so the belief worldview would be that what that conflict therefore presents under rights theory and what it needs is an advocate, right? Someone who will advocate for one right over another. Sound familiar? Okay, where do you see rights theory? What's the most common place you see rights theory? Litigation, right? You could even see it in transactional work with lawyers. You see it in families. You see it in the workplace. You go into McDonald's. You see, the rights of the workers. The rights of the customers. Wash your hands, right? We have all kinds. The employment context is full of rights theory. Believes that conflict is competing rights, and one right is going to prevail over another. So if you're mediating from a rights theory, what is it the mediator is looking for? What are you looking for? You're looking for rules, you're looking for regulations, you're looking for advocacy, you're looking for which right, God bless you, will prevail over the other. It's just sort of having you think about when you come into the room, what's guiding you? Needs and interest theory, third theory on the block. This is the theory that came out of Harvard's program on negotiation a little more than 30 years ago. You may have read Getting to Yes. How many of you all are familiar with the book Getting to Yes? Okay, that's needs and interest theory. What needs and interest theory suggested is that conflict is a problem. And what does a problem need? An answer. And who can give the answer? A problem solver, right? So it was actually quite extraordinary because we didn't have our theories when needs and interest theory came out. The other theories hadn't really been, many other fields have been looking at theory and looking at when people are out of their homeostasis, discombobulated, communication is bad. We could look at a number of different fields as they were talking about and discussing conflict. But in our field of mediation and negotiation, we did not have theories like we do now, articulated really clearly. So needs and interests came on, and it was like sliced bread. It was amazing. And so what it suggested is, and I like to think of it like this. You might need to get a different easel here. 2 different Venn diagrams. Do you remember like first grade, maybe second grade in math class, and you learned about Venn diagrams, right? And you had like, in this one, these were all the children who like, vanilla ice cream, right? And these are all the children who like chocolate ice cream. And then the math question was, how many children like vanilla and chocolate? And your answer was, bingo! You say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you say, exactly. Remember this Venn diagram? This is needs and interest theory. People come into conflicts with all these different concerns, things they don't like, on one side, on another side, and what the mediator, who's a problem solver, is doing is looking for the commonalities. This is where getting to yes came from, and it's also where the expression win-win, right? Win-win came out of our field. I mean, we know that though, we knew that. How many of you have heard of win-win? It's a household name, word, expression right now. Oh, that'd be a win-win. Well, what we have found in the field is that this was the intention, and indeed, especially in international negotiations, this idea of win-win has broken through impasse on many, many treaties, on many, many labor disputes, and in any kind of mediation. It's very powerful. But over time, what we have found with this theory, and you might have experienced this personally, it ends up looking like big win for one side, and maybe a little crumb for the other. Right? You know that. So we've been interested in that. Like, why is that? Something that would be like such a great theory. You're looking for where people have commonalities, and and helping them to get to yes, get them to an agreement. It's in this theory that the goal wasn't around having to redistribute power and having to figure out who's right is more important than the other. It was about problem solving. Get to the commonalities. And it's right in that little part of the Venn diagram that we get people to agree. And we found that that doesn't hold up over time. So think about if you were mediating from rights and interest theory, needs and interest theory, you would be a mediator who would be looking for what? What would you be looking for? The commonalities, exactly. And you would probably try and shape whatever it is that came before you as a familiar problem to you, per your point earlier on worldview. Looking for the way it is that you would see something that's familiar. And then you look for the commonalities. But there's a fourth theory now, and that in terms of how it's been shaped, but it has been defined by all these other areas of research. Cognitive and behavioral psychology, industrial relations, international relations, bargaining in the labor arena. Many, many different fields have been studied. And indeed, what is discussed in other fields is what we now know as relational theory. And relational theory views conflict not as a power struggle, not as competing rights, and not as a problem to be solved. It views conflict as a fracture in the interaction. A fracture in the interaction between two people, between two groups, between two entities, between two political parties. between two states, between two governments, between two countries. A fracture in the interaction. It's interesting, isn't it? We ask each other, what is it? How can we be helpful to people? And we say we want to understand the conflict experience. And the best way to do that is look at our own experiences, because people we work with are human beings too. Look at what we have up here. What is it that's most disturbing? It's a fracture in the interaction. When they don't see it my way. We had been okay at one point. We may have been strangers driving along one of the beautiful roads in West Virginia. And then there's the crash. And we are not okay at all anymore. This fracture in the interaction. The other is not doing it right? They did it this way, not the way I would have done it. What was most upsetting about that is my sense of fairness was challenged. Fracture in my worldview and theirs. Fracture in the interaction. What's happening with them? Worst part, it's going to affect me negatively. Fracture in our interaction. It had been just fine a bit of time ago. I can't get through to him or to her. They don't see it my way. I'm not effective. They're not even talking to me anymore. Relational theory says that fracture in the interaction, if you focus on that fracture where there's resilience and people are able to be resilient and connect on that fracture, that rights theory, figuring out how they want to redistribute power, whose right might be more important than another, how does they want to problem solve, all those aspects of other theories can be byproducts, but only when there is attention paid to the fracture in the interaction. That's relational conflict theory. That might have you really thinking, certainly has had me thinking now for a long time. Because if you choose to mediate from a framework that is guided by relational theory, what you will be doing is very, very different. And one of the most important aspects is face-to-face dialogue. Because that's the only way that the interaction is restored. Empowerment shifts and recognition shifts are now the state-of-the-art terms. All under the relational theory umbrella. An empowerment shift is when a person moves from weakness to strength, and a recognition shift is when a person moves from self-absorption to responsiveness. So Debbie could not have planned you better when you said, you look at this list and it just looks so selfish, self-absorbed. The energy of possibility in that self-absorbed experience when you and I are having an experience that the other person doesn't see it my way, and that the other person is broken down, not talking to me anymore, and that the other person, I can't even be effective with them, and on it goes. When I can shift, and others can shift out of self-absorption to becoming more responsive to each other, that is what's called a recognition shift. And when it is coupled with a shift of empowerment, which is when I'm feeling weak, when I'm confused and unsettled, I don't know why they did that. I mean, don't they see it my way? Don't they understand my sense of fairness? Don't they understand that my whole life is going to be disrupted? Don't they understand how this is going to impact me negatively? All of that confusion and fearfulness leads us to be unsure about myself, oftentimes disorganized. That's the weakness experience that comes straight out of what is most upsetting and disturbing. When that can shift to a place of greater personal strength, when I'm a bit clearer, a bit more articulate, a bit more confident, a bit more focused, a bit more decisive, that is where we would say, as theorists and as practitioners, and in all those matters, I know some of you want to hear about the Clever case, that's where all the rubber meets the road. And so it is in that framework of looking for weakness and looking for self-absorption because of the belief that what matters most to people is they want help with that fracture in their interaction, because that is the conflict experience, and it's the conflict experience around the world. We have had the incredible privilege of asking people around the world that question that I posed to you. You are joined by hundreds of thousands of other people who will talk about what is most upsetting and disturbing to them. Your mediation practice can be dramatically changed, different, augmented, enhanced by thinking about a worldview that looks at the fracture in the interaction, and what people want most is to be restored. Changing conflict interaction is just that. We take this experience of being weak and self-absorbed, which is completely human. I probably experienced it this morning when I was wondering, and I'm sure Anita did, and many of us were trying to figure out the slide deck, for weakness, a little bit of confusion, how are we going to do it? And then to be still responsive to other, right? We're not going to be totally in conflict about that, but the conflict experience is coming on, right? You may have thought, where are you going today? Where are you going to park? Were you on time? Did you actually register? Was there something that you did right now? Where are you going to sit in this room? It's the conflict experience of weakness. It's completely healthy. It keeps us alive. In fact, because we're alive, we experience conflict. But that, coupled with self-absorption, leads to the fractures, leads to people being completely alienated from each other, and then it leads to what is at the tip of the conflict escalation cycle, which is when people have really dehumanized each other. They're pretty polarized, and we have many examples of that right now in our country. Conflict can turn the corner, however, thank goodness, it's a very positive outlook, when we can shift from weakness to being strong personally, individually, my sense of self is regained and restored, and when we can make a shift as well from being self-absorbed to becoming more responsive to another person who may not be responsive to us, but we can to them. And what we know about now, reciprocity, is that when we do that, there's a much higher likelihood that the other person will respond as well, because they're just simply still in the weakness and self-absorbed cycle. With me on this? So empowerment and recognition, when you turn the corner, can provide for that interaction between two people, or 4 people, or 6 people, or 20 people, or 20,000 people, to be restored to a sense where the interaction itself becomes a little bit more positive. That little bit more positive leads to people being a little bit more constructive. That's where ideas come out, and that's where people are able to then hear each other. A little bit more constructive leads to people not being alienated, but actually reconnected. They're restored to each other. So even if, and you hear it in mediation, it's okay, so we don't see it your way. We think that what you've just shown us is probably not complete, but we're willing to take a look at that, and we're willing to take whatever we've got. We also would like for you to look at, that's a very, very different conversation. That's because a mediator has restored people and given them the opportunity to restore themselves where there had been a fracture in the interaction. And then they move to something, as I mentioned, more positive, something that then becomes more constructive, something that is more connected, and then something that's actually more humanized. And in our world, well, we'll talk about that later. When people are more humanized, agreement, no agreement, agreement plus, very complicated agreements, etc., that's what they're going to remember about the mediation practice. And as a last closing piece before we take a break, my belief is that that's why people return to you. We know that's why they return to vocal mediation. because they've had that kind of an experience, or they've told somebody else that's the experience that they've had, or they've told another court system that's the experience they've had, or they told another judge that they got the report and that was the experience that they had, not just at the case of study. So changing conflict interaction is where we're leave that right now. It's a lot of food for thought. It also might resonate with you. It might be like, a good cup of coffee, like of course. It also might jiggle you up, and you are welcomed, and I welcome you to the table, kicking the tires and being jiggled up. And we'll leave here a little bit calmer as you will decide what it is that guides you. So thank you. We'll take a break. We'll take a break for 15 minutes, and we'll see you right back here 15 minutes from now, which will be, let's say, at like 7 minutes after. Is that about right?